Good evening and welcome to tonight's Talk Business. Now, trade is critical to the Pacific's prosperity, fueling economic growth, supporting good jobs at home, raising living standards, and helping Pacific Islanders, including Fijians, provide for their families with affordable goods and services. The EU's trade relationship with the Pacific states, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and Samoa included, is set by an economic partnership agreement. And just earlier last week, the European Union and the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat signed a new trade project with 14.3 million Fijian dollars to enhance the trade capacity of Fiji and 14 other Pacific countries. And with us on the show tonight to talk trade and business is the EU Ambassador to the Pacific, Sujiro, and the Director of Programs and Initiatives of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, Director Zarak. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Ambassador Sim, what is strengthening Pacific intra-regional and international trade project, and how will it benefit Fiji and other Pacific countries?
Well, this is what we call the SPIRIT project, strengthening Pacific intra-regional trade and international trade. This is an investment for the European Union of 14.3 million Fijian dollars. It is a part of the Pacific Regional Economic Integration Support Program, which is in itself an investment of more than 92 million Fijian dollars. So the idea for us is to assist Pacific Island countries to strengthen the capacity of their trade bodies, but also to accompany the implementation of the economic partnership agreements, which allow duty-free and quota-free access for Pacific Island countries to the European market. The third objective is to support the Aid for Trade strategy, which was recently adopted by the Pacific Island Forum. And finally, as a side benefit, it will allow to create and develop a database of trade data.
Thank you for that, Ambassador. Now, Director Khan, how beneficial is this project for the region?
Thank you very much. Firstly, we'd like to extend our appreciation to the European Union as well as the EU Delegation Office in Fiji for their tremendous support in ensuring that we were able to get this agreement across the finishing line. Agreements such as this with important development partners such as the European Union is very critical to the Pacific Islands Forum. We have 14 Pacific ACP states who will be benefiting from the SPIRIT project, including Timor-Leste as well. And so these countries are basically spread across the Pacific. You have populations ranging from 1,500 people in Niue across to over 10 million people in Papua New Guinea. And so a lot of these countries have aspirations, trade aspirations, when it comes to exporting to the European Union, building their trade capacity, and the assistance that will be provided through the SPIRIT project will ensure that these countries are able to achieve those aspirations.
Thank you for that, Director. Now, Ambassador Sim, why is it important that trade opportunities are created regionally and internationally for Pacific countries?
Well, we decided to put the emphasis on economic regional integration in the Pacific because I think this is one of the regions where there are many hurdles to regional economic integration because of the small size of the economies and because of the remoteness and the difficulty to access those Pacific Island countries. So I would say an extra effort is required to make sure that we maximize the opportunities both for international trade and intra-regional trade between these countries and between these countries and the rest of the world.
Thank you for that, Ambassador Sim. And Director Khan, how will the fund from the project be used and why so?
As the Ambassador was explaining, we have a number of areas under the SPIRIT project which we hope to utilize the funds to benefit the countries. One of the key areas would be to send trade advisors to each of the sub-regions in the Pacific, so including at the MSG, the Melanesian Spearhead Group, the Polynesian Leaders Group, as well as the Micronesian Trade Committee in the north. It's innovative in its nature because we're taking trade capacity right to the sub-regional level. So a stronger sub-region means we have stronger regionalism as well. And so apart from that, as the Ambassador was explaining, we also have the Pacific Aid for Trade strategy that was endorsed by Forum Trade Ministers last year. That will cover the period of 2020 to 2025. And under the strategy, we have a number of exciting initiatives, particularly in terms of e-commerce, then the digital economy, as well as supporting the strengthening of quality infrastructure in the region so that not only are we able to meet the standards of our export markets, but we can also ensure that counterfeit goods, for example, and other substandard consumer products don't reach the Pacific region as well.
And Director Khan, you mentioned about strengthening regionalism for many of the governments and in the Pacific Island countries as developing states, why is it important to strengthen regionalism in this region?
I think when we talk about regionalism, trade is sort of the ideal example where countries come together and try and consolidate and build their trade capacity at a collective level. Trade by nature allows countries to achieve something we call regional economic integration. What that means is that they're able, as small economies, they're able to come together to ensure that resources are used much more wisely, especially when it comes to, for example, training customs officers to ensure that they're able to implement trade agreements, to ensure that we can provide resources to build the capacity of our countries to access important markets like the EU, which has very high standards.
Thank you for that, Director Kano. Ambassador Sim, a final question to you for this segment. The EU is traditionally being seen as a development partner, working on climate change, oceans and environment, governance, gender and human rights, to name a few. Is the EU thinking of moving away from being a donor to more a business and trade partner for the Pacific?
Well, when people look at the European Union, they see us, especially in this region, indeed for, I would say, two things. Number one, our commitment to democracy and human rights, and it will be unwavering. And number two, for our commitment to the development of this region with very strong engagement on climate change. Don't forget that we're the single largest entity in the world which committed to a zero net emission by 2050 or carbon neutrality. We support oceans, we support sustainable development. But people lose sight of the fact that the European Union started as the European economic community, as the European market. After the Second World War, it is actually the most successful success story on trade and economic integration. And over the years, what was a trade union and an economic union became a political union. So our ambition is global. Now we have the ambition to be perceived not only as a beacon for democracy and human rights, not only as a development partner, particularly active in the area of climate change, sustainable development and oceans, but also as a trade, business and economic partner for the Pacific.
Thank you for that, Ambassador Sim. Now stay with us. We have more coming up after the break.